Hello all, my name is Jocelyn Bos-Fisher and I'm looking forward to giving a presentation today, and I just want to thank University Express for being able to give us this opportunity to come up with a more flexible and a different way to bring presentations to you during quarantine. So I'm going to start sharing my screen here. If you could just give me a second. All right. So today I'm presenting on a healthy state of mind and really working to create an overall sense of well-being. This is a topic that's really near and dear to my heart. I'm a clinical program manager for a local EAP program. I've been in the field for about 7, 8 years now in clinical social work. And I think that the topic of mental health is so important, especially with everything that's going on now, as well as it's very good timing that they've been able to bring this presentation in at the tail end of Mental Health Awareness Month. So things that I'm hoping to go over today is this idea of mental health versus mental illness, right? And really looking to destigmatize these concepts. What is the impact of mental health, and really hope to convince you or give you some context that prioritizing our mental health, just as we might prioritize our own physical health, is really vital and really important. What are some common myths, as well as what are some warning signs? What are some warning signs that maybe your mental health has started to be impacted? And then importantly, how do we proactively manage our mental health? And what are things that we can do and action steps that we can start to take to manage this aspect that is very important and a part of all of us. So I'd love you to just take a second and think about what comes to mind when you hear the term mental health. Now take a couple moments. What are some things that come to mind when you hear the term mental illness? So what is mental health, right? What is our mental health? This is about well-being, right? It's an overall sense of well-being. It's our emotions, our thoughts, our feelings, our ability to help solve problems, overcome those difficulties, and understand the world around us, right? It's sort of our ability to mentally and emotionally navigate the world in which we live in. Things that can help contribute to good mental health is productive activities, work, school, caregiving, right? Like a sense of purpose. Whatever it is that you do, whether that's through work or through your relationships or through outside community and activities that you do, that sense of purpose can really help add to an overall positive and a higher level of mental health. Healthy relationships, which we're going to be talking about later on, especially when it comes to proactively managing our mental health, can really help contribute to this area of our overall well-being. And good mental health, healthy mental health, it really helps us adapt to change, right? And cope with adversity, which I don't know your experience of the last couple months, but really in a state of adversity, constant change, constant uncertainty. And it's really important, really vital to recognize that being in constant states of this uncertainty and being in constant adversity can really start to tax our mental health. So again, what can we do to try to mitigate that impact overall? Versus the concept of mental illness, right? So these are two separate things. So mental illness is actually an illness, right? An illness, a disorder, a diagnosis that affects the way that you think, feel, and behave, right? So whereas mental health is, our ability to sort of navigate through, the mental illness is something that actually then impacts how we can navigate through. And that usually is how we're thinking and feeling about ourselves, which is therefore changes how we might behave and interact with others, right? There's many, many different types of mental illnesses and a lot of different symptoms that come with those. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. I really like to stress mental illness, it doesn't discriminate, right? So this is across all gender identities, race, ethnicities, ages. This impacts everyone. And that's important to consider here. It takes many forms, just as there can be physical health disorders or illnesses that can be less severe to more severe. Mental illness, it can take a lot of forms, right? It can be, less severe, less intense, into some of those more severe mental illness and mental disorders. But again, just like with most illnesses, they're treatable. Mental illness is also treatable, right? So I just really like to stress the difference between these two concepts, these two words, because I think very often we start to think mental health is mental illness, right? Or mental illness means that we're talking about mental health. And these are really two different things. If it is important just to know and to note that if you do ignore your mental health and some of those life satisfaction issues, right? If we're under constant stress and we're not doing anything to try to help improve our own mental health, and we're in sort of these stress environments, and there's a lot of situations that happen that are outside of our control, it is possible that over time we could then develop a mental illness. So we all have mental health, and we'll talk about stats a little bit later, but only about 1 in 5 individuals do have a mental illness, right? So again, these are two very different concepts that often in sort of our society and media and how we talk about them can sort of become one and of the same, which is they're two very different things. So I want you to just take a second. So, look at this statement, right? So people with mental illness have low mental health. And do you think this is true or false? This is false, right? So like most things, there is a continuum, there is a spectrum. So, we could have optimal like mental health and be doing great and have no mental illness and sort of be in this quadrant. Or we could have a serious mental illness diagnosis, and again, with proper treatment, whether or not that's medication or just psychotherapy, you can still have optimal mental health and be in this sort of quadrant as well. Just on the flip side, the same thing can happen. We might not have a mental illness diagnosis, but after many stressors that are happening and not taking some proactive or preventative measures, we can start to have poor mental health. And again, over time, over longer periods of time, this could or can then create maybe a mental illness and a mental illness diagnosis as well. So again, I just really like to stress this is a continuum, and things change over time. You could at one point in your life be in sort of this top quadrant, things are going well. And then sometimes we hit some of those life stressors, those life bumps that we really had not predicted or not been planning for. We could bring up the recent COVID situation, right? We didn't plan for this, and you might start to bump down into that lower sector, right? It's not optimal mental health. I'm starting to get down to that poor mental health. I don't have a mental illness yet. And yet, I'm not sort of functioning at 100%, right? And these can be other things like, grief, bereavement, unexpected deaths, unexpected financial changes. And these stressors, again, are not predictable, but it can impact our mental health. So true or false, right? Mental health problems are not common in older adults. And this is false, okay? So 1 in 5 American adults live with a mental health disorder. And as I said, mental health problems and then even disorders and illnesses, they do not discriminate, right, based on age. Some pretty recent stats are showing that depression affects nearly 20% of Americans age 65 or older, right? And those can be very similar statistics for individuals that are affected by depression that are in some of the younger groups or ages 65 and under. There's also a lot of information that people with mental health problems or illnesses are really underserved. And again, I think a lot of that can be due to this idea of stigma. So around 60% of people with a mental health problem and mental illness won't seek the help they need. right? And I think this is an important number, an important thing to consider, right? Because if you're starting to see some of the warning signs, which I'll talk about later, and you're not taking some steps to say, hey, maybe I just need to reach out to get some support. And when I say support, I mean, you could be maybe seeing a counselor or reaching out and changing some things with your primary care doctor. And it might not be that long, right? Just like, some physical disorders, like I've twisted my ankle, I have to go to PT, get some exercises, I work on those exercises, and then I'm good to go and I'm back to where I was. Same thing with our own mental health. Um, if we're starting to have a sort of a tweaked mental health, right, and we're starting to struggle, we just need to come up with some PT strategies, implement those over time, and then we're good to go. We're right back to that level of functioning that we were at, right? And stigma is one of those main reasons that people don't reach out when they're starting to notice, like, ow, like it's starting to hurt a little bit, right? I'm okay. I can push through this. I'll be all right. And again, I just really want to stress that comment made earlier, that if we're under constant stress and we're starting to have mental health problems over a long period of time, it could eventually lead into an illness or a disorder, right? So being as proactive as possible, catching things sooner, and taking some necessary steps can really possibly help that later on illness or disorder. So true or false, right? Mental health can impact your physical health. I'm sure you already know this one. I've been sort of harping sort of the duality of this all, but yeah, true, right? If we're under high distress environments, there's a lot of research and evidence that shows that if our mental health is getting impacted, then our physical health is being impacted. You could be 32% more likely to develop cancer if you're, having ongoing mental health, high distress concerns. Those diagnosed with depression have increased risk of heart disease. So while you may have depression, then you also could have that increased risk of heart disease. So if we're not addressing the depression, it takes a toll on your body and your physical health, and then eventually could lead to other physical health diseases. So again, really want to stress the importance of, just as we would proactively try to manage our physical health, what can we do to manage our mental health as well? So, true or false, right? I can't do anything for a person with mental health problem. It's probably no brainer, but false, right? Our friends, our coworkers, our loved ones can really make a huge, huge difference when it comes to our mental health, right? So what can we do if we're concerned, if we're seeing anything? We can start to recognize those warning signs and reach out to that person. Be aware of the supports that are available, and I'll talk about those a little bit later on. But even right now, if you're seeing some of the warning signs that I'm going to talk about with your friends, with your coworkers, maybe isolating a little bit more. Maybe you have a standing Zoom get-together meeting once a week, and you start to notice that somebody keeps canceling last minute and not showing up, or saying, I just can't today, sorry, just not feeling up to it. Reach out, call, check in, outside of the group, and I just want to check in and see how you're doing. Do you want to talk about it? And really, one of the big things that can make a difference is just listen, right? Just listen to what this person is going through and what they're experiencing. It's not your job as a support, as a friend, to fix it, right, or to change what's happening. And sometimes just the act of somebody feeling heard and listened to can be enough for them to feel validated and, oh, this is how I'm feeling. And that might give them enough strength and enough empowerment to feel like maybe I can start taking some of those steps to just try to work out of this, right? To get out of this feeling that I'm in. So some general warning signs that we just want to consider. So I'm going to talk about two different areas, things that you might be experiencing, and then also things that you might be recognizing in other people. So things that you might be experiencing, decrease or increase in appetite, general changes in weight. And again, this is changes in weight that you're not trying to make, right? So if you are working on maybe bulking up and you're increasing, protein intake and working out more and you're starting to gain weight, that would make sense, right? Or if you're on the opposite end, sort of cutting back and watching what you're eating and maybe, exercising more, and you are noticing that you're losing weight, those would be, things that make sense. So, extreme or large changes in weight that you're really not trying to make happen. Any depressed mood that's really starting to last longer than 2 weeks, again, this does not mean you have depression, right? It just is a warning sign or something that you might want to pay attention to. And then we'll talk about maybe what are some things that you can try to put in place to alleviate that feeling. Any feeling numb, emotionless overall, any increased use of alcohol, drugs, tobacco, caffeine. While these things can feel like a coping mechanism, a lot of these things have the opposite effect where they're a depressant. So you start to use them and maybe feel good in that moment or have sort of that brief moment of feeling like this is better. And yet, it actually impacts your biology so that you could be feeling even lower after the fact when some of those effects wear off. Anything of you're just feeling worthless, inappropriate guilt, helplessness, any thoughts of suicide. And we'll talk about a number to call. If you're having any thoughts of self-harm or that I don't want to live, I don't want to wake up tomorrow and be here anymore, and then you have thoughts about how you might do this, there's a crisis services number that everyone can call and use, and people are available 24/7. And again, that's just if you need to talk to somebody. Any physical problems that otherwise you can't explain, any of that unexplained fatigue, energy loss, or sleep changes. I don't know about any of you, but I imagine that some of these things that you're experiencing, or that you're at least seeing in this list, might be some very real symptoms and sort of experiences that you've been having over the last month or two. And again, the situation that we're in is an unpredicted stressor, right? It's an unknown. We're constantly in a state of unknown and uncertainty. And that ongoing stressor can really start to impact our mental health. Because again, we are not built to be running in constant stress. It's just not how we are built as humans. So we'll talk about some strategies on how to try to shut off that stress reaction that can happen and give you some moments of slowing down. Some things that you might be seeing in others, which is just important to pay attention to. Any changes in appearance or dress. That could be like physical appearance, disheveled, losing weight. Maybe somebody that's usually really put together is starting not to look as put together. There could even be some outward expressions in their home or their yard, right? If somebody is really focused on, the grass is always cut, gardens are always looking in great shape, and you're starting to see that that's declining, that could be a warning sign that somebody's struggling with some mental health concerns. Any confusion, disorientation, problems with concentration or decision making, that can also be a big warning sign that maybe something's going on that could be a mental health concern. Any memory loss, especially recent or short-term memory problems, can also be a large concern. And any of that social withdrawal, right? So that loss of interest in things that used to be enjoyable. And I think what's another helpful point on both of these areas, some of these symptoms, right, and these signs that you might be seeing could also be linked to a physical health concern, or a physical disorder. So again, these are warning signs. They're little red flags that our body is trying to put up to say, hey, I need you to pay attention to this. I need you to do something different, right? Think of it as like little rumble strips in the road, right? You wouldn't be continuing to drive over those rumble strips even faster and even faster. Eventually we're gonna bottom that car out. We might, blow a tire, right? We have to pay attention to these little red flags that our body is trying to tell us, and our mood and our personality is trying to put up and say, hey, I need some extra support here. So how do we maintain our own mental health, right? The big thing, because this is important, right? I hope I've given you some information that this is important for us to consider, and how do we maintain this? And there's sort of three large areas that we can think about. It's our physical health, really, keeping active and trying to eat well, drink sensibly, drinking enough water. And we'll talk a little bit more about physical health and why it's so helpful to maintain our mental health. Supports and trying to decrease that isolation. Self-care, right? Doing something you're good at, talking about your feelings. And so we'll go into all these areas in a little bit more depth. So physical health. Again, I keep bringing up mental health, physical health, very intertwined together. It's sometimes hard to determine if it could be a physical health concern that's coming out, or it's actually mental health that's causing a physical health concern, right? Or vice versa. So there's a lot of evidence that shows exercise, it reduces our stress, right? And gets rid of tension. It helps decrease anxiety and depression. Just doing some physical activity and exercise, it can start to release some of the same endorphins and hormones that give you sort of that pleasure feeling, like I feel really good, which is what's getting impacted chemically in your brain at times when you do have anxiety or depression. And it really can help boost that overall well-being and health, right? And again, physical health, this doesn't have to be I'm, getting on a spin bike, or I'm climbing up and down large hills. It could be something as simple as, I'm just going to make sure that every hour I'm getting up and I'm making sure to stretch and start to walk around my house for 5 minutes, right? Build up to some physical health activities, right? At least if you can, 3-4 times a week, try to do something that's at least, 20-30 minutes long. But again, this can give you a really big bang for your buck when it comes to helping manage your mental health. Social supports. So this is a big one, and in a lot of ways can be your number one weapon against that stress experience, and can really help overall mental health. Just connection, right? Creating connection with other individuals can start to release dopamine and oxytocin. And these are really some of our pleasure hormones in our body, right? That helps manage our stress. That alone is like a natural way of sort of kicking off, again, that stress response, which then allows you to sort of get that break. So it's not like you're starting to run that car on empty, and start to slow down that stress process and give yourself some time to recoup. With what's happening with quarantine, we're talking about social distancing, right? But social distancing is very different than social isolation. So if there's any ways that you can try to increase any connection to your supports and your social supports, even during this time, which I know is really difficult, that's a huge benefit in trying to help alleviate maybe some of those symptoms and warning signs that you might start experiencing. I know that the Erie County Department of Senior Services website has a really great resource on how to decrease isolation during a time of quarantine. So that might be a helpful resource just to look at and get some maybe more unique and creative ideas. There's a lot of evidence that shows increased connection. It can increase your own self-esteem. It increases life expectancy. Right, those individuals that are closer to friends and family and see them more often can have a longer lifespan. And it really does, again, it points to that overall increased sense and feeling of well-being. So things we can do, right? Volunteer, see our friends. Is it part-time work? Is it community engagement in different ways? Even having another outlet like a therapist or a support, or counseling, any faith-based activities that give you that sense of connection and community. And again, I would point you to the Erie County Department of Senior Services website that has some really great resources on how do we try to decrease isolation in this time. Self-care, right? I imagine a lot of you, a lot of everybody practices this concept of self-care. This is about how do we take care of you, right? How do we take care of ourselves? So this is engaging in practices that are really meaningful to you. And everyone is very different, right? Everyone's sort of self-care plan and self-care process can be really different. So maybe this is prayer, walking in the woods, sitting quietly. I apologize, I just have to shift in my chair quickly. Reading inspirational material, quotes, taking that bath, writing in a journal, right? These are just, again, practices that are unique to you and really speak to you and help give you sort of that sense of refilling, right? Refilling the tank. It can also be really helpful, especially right now, is lower expectations of what you think you should be doing. All right. And if you're having moments where you're like, oh, I should have done this, I could have gotten to this, like, why didn't I do this? That might be another little red flag that something's going on in that thinking process that's not going to be the most helpful right now for your mental health, right? Sure, we should be doing everything, right? And yet sometimes just getting through the day and doing those small steps that you have taken, that's enough, and that's okay. And I really I really want to stress this, especially right now with the current situation that's happening with the global pandemic. Our bodies are under a constant state of stress right now, whether less or more, depending on your situation, your experience of this process, and your understanding of what's happening. But either way, right, our norms have been completely flipped upside down and changed. And if you think you should be functioning at the same level of where you were before, quarantine and COVID-19 hit this area, that's not realistic, right? That would be saying, I just, broke my leg, but I should be able to still run that marathon like I did last year, right? It's just not realistic. And I think that's sometimes something that adds to that stigma of mental health is you can't see the injury, right? Broken leg, easy. Cast, you have crutches, it makes sense that you can't do what you normally could do. Whereas mental health, it's internal. And you can't see that cast. You can't see that you have something broken that's trying to heal. And again, that should thinking, or I need to be doing more, I could be doing more, not going to be the most helpful thing when it comes to your own mental health and self-care. Really reminding yourself that your reactions are normal can just be another great proactive practice. Again, we have feelings. It's okay to understand that those reactions and feelings are normal. It doesn't mean you're reacting on them or doing anything with them, but just recognizing that those feelings and experiences are normal. And then find activities that you're passionate about, right? Challenging yourself to try to find new things. Especially during this time, right? There might be new opportunities for new hobbies or new interests because things have slowed down a little bit, and you might have some more time possibly. One really great strategy that I like to stress for this idea of slowing down is this concept of mindfulness, right? And this is a stress reduction technique that you can practice. There's a lot of different ways that you can practice mindfulness. Mindfulness is sort of the umbrella of this idea. And, the one strategy I'm going to be showing you is it's called a grounding technique. And that's just one way that you can practice mindfulness. I love this picture, right? I think it just really speaks to the concepts, right? So you think about, going for a walk, or you think about maybe just even doing the dishes or just doing your normal day to day, right? And it's very often that when we're doing something, we're not really thinking about what we're doing in that moment, right? We're thinking about all the other things that have had to happen, or maybe we're replaying a conversation that we've had in our head, or something that was really frustrating us, and we're just thinking about that, right? Versus mindfulness, which is sort of the dog's blurb, right? I'm just being present to exactly what is in front of me right now and my experience of it in this moment, right? And again, this is a way that sort of all that jumbleness that's happening over here on the person's thought process, that can really add to this feeling of overwhelmed and constant stress, and it really starts to play into over time, can start to impact your mental health. And again, how do we shut that off? Give yourself a little break, a little bit of time to just slow things down. So if you're comfortable, I'd love to lead you in a mindfulness exercise. So wherever you're sitting right now, I'm going to ask you to get comfortable in the chair. Sort of sit back, have your 2 feet on the ground, and let your hands fall to your lap in a comfortable position. And if you're comfortable, I'm going to ask you to close your eyes and start to focus on where your breath is in your body. So take a deep breath in, 1, 2, and exhale, 1, 2. Take another deep breath in and inhale, and exhale. Start breathing normally as you usually would. Pay attention to where your breath is in your body. You feel it in your belly. You're recognizing it in your chest. If your mind started to wander, that's okay. Just bring it back to recognizing where your breath is within your body. Take another deep breath in and exhale. Start to pay attention to any noises that you might be able to hear around you in your environment. Any physical sensations that you're starting to feel. Your body feeling heavy, your legs are a little uncomfortable. How's the tension in your shoulders? Really focus in on your body. If your mind's wandered, that's okay. Focus back in on your breath and where it is in your body. I'm going to ask you to take another deep breath in and exhale. And when you're ready, open your eyes and take a second to recognize how you feel in this moment. All right. So that was a mini grounding exercise, right? That was only about 2 minutes long. There's a lot of research that shows that grounding and mindfulness, really all you need is about 90 seconds, 2 minutes to just sort of shut off some of those running thoughts and things that might be going on for you, and just sort of clicking on and turning on that sort of being slow, being present to just sort of where you are. I'm hopeful that, if you feel comfortable trying this exercise with me, that you're feeling a little relaxed, a little bit sense of calm, sense of peace in some ways. Um, it is possible that this idea of mindfulness and even a grounding exercise could make you feel uncomfortable and could actually do the opposite. So again, right, this is about, when we talk about self-care, it's really how do we engage in practices that are meaningful to you, and really trying to find how do you build those in a way that makes sense to you. We talked about this idea of just being aware of supports that are available out there for either yourself or just for those that you might have some concerns about. Because again, we all have mental health, right? If they're seeing something that makes you a little bit concerned, be aware of what is available. I discussed, any thoughts of sort of self-harm or like suicide, wanting to hurt yourself, wanting to kill yourself. There is a National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. You can see the number up here first. Crisis Services is a local Erie County-based program, nonprofit. Again, they do great work. People are available 24/7, and this doesn't mean that if you call, somebody's going to come get you and pick you up and do something that you're not comfortable doing. It just gives you an opportunity to talk to somebody who's going to be able to help talk you through and walk it through. If people are concerned about you, they can get somebody out there and get the necessary support or intervention in place. But again, it's a great resource and great opportunity to call if you're feeling you know, any of those thoughts of self-harm. I mentioned the Erie County Department of Senior Services, the numbers here, but the website itself, if that's something that's helpful for you to navigate, has some really great resources available, and even more COVID specific right now. Project Hope, helping older people excel, a lot of great resources. If there's anything about concerns about the older individuals, you know, emotional, physical neglect, abuse, there's Adult Protective Services phone number. And if mindfulness practice sort of resonated with you or spoke to you, there's a lot of free YouTube videos that you can get. There's a couple apps that you can get on your phone, some free ones. I speak highly of Headspace or Calm, because there's some evidence behind those, and that they help you know, decrease that stress and increase overall well-being. Some of the resources just that I used for today's presentations are noted here. I'm going to stop sharing quickly. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate, again, the opportunity to come to you in this platform, in this environment. And I will miss coming out to the senior centers to be able to give this presentation live and get to meet everyone and have that engagement. But I do appreciate your time for watching, and I hope that you got at least one small piece of something that could be helpful to you and your ongoing mental health journey. So thank you.